Hello. Welcome to the stream. A nice cold Friday. Let's see if this is all working. Hi, starting soon. Yep, looks good. If you're watching the VOD, my name is Nathan Hatch. I talk about health and wellness, answer your questions. If you would like, you can skip ahead when the starting screen disappears, is when the stream really starts. And for now, I just let people trickle in. So hang tight and we'll get started shortly. All right, well, that's probably enough time to wait. Hello. I'm enjoying some milk tea at the moment. Might hear me slurping. So I've thought that maybe changing the format of doing this online stuff would be useful to, instead of having like a set theme, to just talk about just to be available for people to like ask questions and to get help with their health, since that's the ultimate goal of my work. But Friday probably is not a really great day to stream, and there's a lot going on in the world right now, so there's not many of you here right now. So I'll go ahead and start talking about something that I thought is really kind of probably something important to cover, which are vegetables. And I'm laughing because this is really funny to talk about, because, you know, we all grew up with the idea that vegetables are, you know, one of the best things to be eating for ourselves, for our health. And it's actually kind of become, for a lot of people, that idea has been challenged by a lot of information that exists on the internet. And the internet is great. The internet is awesome. It gives me here the opportunity to chat with people that, you know, need help and are interested in my work. And, but it can also be a significant source of misinformation and confusion when it comes to health and nutrition. And everybody that comes and arrives at my work usually gets here because our health has become so bad, and all the information that we found elsewhere hasn't really helped. And even stuff that kind of helped doesn't really help all the way. And so we get left with feeling, you know, lost and confused and sometimes hopeless. I've had an upsurge in people signing up for coaching lately, especially some extremely ill, very, very ill people. And it just kind of underscored for me the effect and impact of a lot of misinformation on the internet. That causes people confusion and also harm. And for instance, you know, a lot of people with cancer, when you do like online investigation and research into curing the cancer that you have, or healing, or even just surviving the cancer that you might have, there's so much information out there. One of the most popular that has been really taking a prominence is the idea that you can starve cancer cells. And it's completely wrong on the face of it. I mean, it's not even like nebulous about how wrong it is. It's so wrong, in fact, that The Lancet, one of the most respected scientific journals, medical journals in the world, published a paper / study recently talking about this misinformation about how you cannot starve cancer. That is not an effective way of treating cancer. It's not established in any scientific discipline. And it's really harmful when people try to take that route, because it's not possible. All of your cells run on the same fuel that cancer cells run on. So when you try to starve cancer cells, you end up starving your own body, and you are more likely to die rather than less likely to die. And those theories are being pushed by doctors who have never dealt with cancer themselves and haven't actually treated anybody with those ideas. They're just perpetuating them to become influencers and make money and that kind of thing. And so anyway, so even the Lancet, a highly respected medical journal, comes out and says this is all wrong. Yet social media and mainstream media too thrives on clicks and views and interaction, and so the content that is distributed there is not necessarily accurate. It is the content that is going to get the most clicks and views, and appealing to people's biases is more effective in driving traffic than actually telling the truth, which is why there are currently only 3 viewers here right now. But hello, guys. And I was talking about this too with somebody that I was coaching. Like a lot of, quite a few of people who have gained mainstream prominence and large followings, a lot of them too, you know, being the types that are like misogynistic and take steroids and promote really harmful dieting behaviors. A lot of them actually became, hi Mike, welcome. Glad to see you. Yeah, good timing, yeah. Oh yeah, abdominal, yeah, we could talk about that, that'd be great. So, but I was talking about because those people, you know, those people have like a really high following, viewership, and one of the reasons that they do is because a lot of them actually offer like multi-level marketing schemes where their followers can help sell the person's product and thereby make money through it. So those people actually have a vested monetary interest in promoting the popularity of a personality that has nothing to do with the ideological or substantive content of their material, and instead is, you know, it's a lot like a lot of the stock craziness that's been going on recently and other financial shenanigans, is that a lot of people have financial investment in the success or failure of certain personalities and rich people and popular content and information, and so it's inherently not necessarily based on fact or actual science. So, you know, so like even the Lancet comes out and says that starving yourself is actually antithesis to cancer treatment, but no one picks that up because it's not something that actually, like, you know, drives clicks and views, because to do that you have to appeal to people's prejudices and biases if you want to drive up massive interaction. But so a lot of people, you know, people that find my work and people that usually come from like forums where my work, or where I used to be active until those sites became extremely toxic, come find me through those kinds of outlets where there is also a great mix of lots of different ideas and viewpoints and information and misinformation. And so it can be really difficult to really understand what is actually good for you. And a great deal of the community that orbits my work has adopted, unfortunately, the attitude that vegetables are bad for you. And, you know, Ray Peat, whose work mine is based on, the biologist that my work is based on, a lot of his work, he would suggest to that end, or talk about the problems of plant foods and how they can cause certain problems, like too much fiber, anti-nutrients that they might contain, you know, like phytate and things like that. And it all comes down to just a simple misunderstanding. And because Ray was not necessarily wrong about any of those things at all. What he was wrong about, but not so much him, but also forum people, is what to do with that information, how to apply that information to actually effectually fix your health. And Ray's position, but more so people that that participate in forum content, took that information like, oh, it's something harmful, so therefore we should just avoid it. And so then you end up getting people who have marginal or serious disease attempting to improve their conditions with fruit and sugar and milk and things like that, and meat and protein, and they don't actually get better, and very often actually get worse. So then they're confused because they hear that this is really good for you, but then they don't see that reflected in their own experience. And there are people that have been on these forums. I mean, God, like, I first found these forums 10 years ago, and I haven't been on them for the last 5 or 6 years. I was in a Facebook one probably 3 or 4 years ago, but then I quit out of that one too. It's just such a waste of time trying to help people that don't want to be helped, or are getting into debates and arguments, because I don't care what people think. Like, this kind of content that I do is for you guys who are interested in what I have to say. I'm not necessarily to debate or convince people. So the problem is that the solution to the problems with plant foods is not to avoid them, it is to fix our ability to digest them. And one of the primary problems in the interaction between our body and our microbiome and food that we eat is the microbiome itself. As human beings, we do not possess the ability to break down cellulose. It requires cellulase, I think, is that the enzyme? I think cellulase, made by microorganisms, to break down the cell wall of plant foods. Ray Peat has said too that plant foods are healthier for you than animal products, hands down, but that plant foods are harder to digest. And this is what happens when we are metabolically ill, or it's also like winter time, or you have any other kind of microbial stress that causes microbial dysbiosis in your gut. You can entirely lose the ability to break down plant foods. And so then what happens is that you end up craving foods that are easier to digest, like meat and animal products, because animal products do not have inhibitory substances like phytate and anti enzymes, enzyme inhibitors and things like that. Plant toxins idea you think Ray got from Bruce Ames and think hasn't been clinically relevant. Yeah, I actually don't know who Bruce Ames is though, but yeah. But yeah, because we completely lack the ability as animals to actually break down cellulose, we are entirely dependent on microorganisms to break down plant food. And like I talk in my book, there's actually this really complex, long chain of causation that I've uncovered that involves archaea and vitamin D and B12. And that is the foundational requisite for being able to have a microbiome that is capable of doing that for us. And the really fascinating thing is when you restore your microbiome and regain that ability to break down plant foods, you actually naturally crave plant foods over animal products, because animal products do not have those inhibitory plants compounds. They are easier to digest, but they're also easier to digest by opportunistic pathogens. Can LPS or endotoxin break down cellulose? Oh, actually, I don't know. I've never looked into that. I don't think so. I think it just requires cellulase, which is really funny too. Like, it's really funny evolutionarily. I don't know why we don't produce cellulase. I think for some reason in my head, I'm thinking I'm saying the wrong thing. Cellulase. because I'm live and now I'm insecure. No, yeah, cellulase. Yeah, cellulases. Because it seems like such an easy evolutionary thing that we could have developed co-evolved at some point, but we just never did. Probably because we were just depending on microbes all the time. So, because inside the cell wall of plants, inside the cells, you've got all this really yummy nutrition. You have copper and vitamin K and magnesium and potassium, and so you actually can't get those nutrients. Oh yeah, cellulose. It can be broken down like naturally, like through other. But Mike, what's really interesting too, this is very similar to. Have Mike? I think it's the Carboniferous period on the Earth when there was not when microorganisms did not have the ability to break down lignin, which is what wood is. Am I saying that wrong too? What is with my brain today thinking I don't know what things are? Yeah, lignin. Yeah, okay. And this is where all of our coal and oil and natural gas come from. Is there was a period of the Earth where microorganisms could not break down wood, and so what happened was instead of decaying when plants died, they just fell on top of each other, and then the weight of their dead forms piled up and crushed into more compact layers, and that created coal and stuff, and cellulase is kind of the same thing. Like most decay is mediated by microorganisms, and so in the rapid transit, and so because we think often that when you eat food that your stomach acid breaks down the food entirely, and that's not true at all. It just separates molecules. It doesn't necessarily or not molecules. It separates proteins and connective structures, but it's not capable of dissolving everything. For that, you need enzymes. Enzymes are much more powerful than acid, and digestion with stomach acid and saliva just starts that process and then makes it easier for enzymes to have access to the other components of whatever you ingest, and since we don't have cellulase as an enzyme, we can't break down cell walls, plant cell walls. So then we have to rely on microorganisms for that. And so this is why people that have high protein, high animal food diets don't tend to have great health, is because although animal foods are easier to break down for us, they are also easier to break down for pathogenic organisms. And because they don't contain any protective phytonutrients. In my work, I've discovered how to stop your shit from smelling. And it's fairly complex because it involves ammonia and sodium malabsorption, but primarily, because I've been doing research into like carotenes and other and microorganisms now for about 6 or 7 years. And even though I was reading, dozens of studies every single day for my research, it wasn't until, how long ago did I find this? Like 2 years ago, I think maybe, that I came across a study that said carotenes are not only antioxidants, they're also anti-reductants. And everyone knows about antioxidants. It's because it's such a buzzword, clickbait material. Oxidation is kind of the flip side of reduction. Redox is a portmanteau of oxidation and reduction. It's this process by which most cells and functions in our body occur is through oxidative or reduction pathways. And so that was really interesting. As soon as I read that, I knew that carotene could be used to inhibit hydrogen sulfide producing microorganisms because they do so by reducing sulfate. we respirate by reducing oxygen. It's kind of funny too, because we talk about how having oxidative respiration, but we oxidize carbohydrate, and in the process, oxygen is reduced. And hydrogen sulfide producing microorganisms reduce sulfate as their respiratory factor. And since they colonize our bodies, our mucosal tissue, and cause malodorous odors like bad breath, stinky feces, and farts, you can use and I'd been using carotene dietarily, but I'd been using it in a quantity-based function, and I realized when I found that out that if you use it instead in a frequency function, that you could actually inhibit bad breath and malodorous feces and flatulence. And you could also use those malodors as a diagnostic tool to understand if you are colonized by hydrogen sulfide producing microbes. You notice a difference in smell between yours and Cohab? Yeah. Your son. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I tell this story. So, Mike, when you say cascara changes the smell, do you mean for the better or for worse? Because I haven't used that in years. I don't like it. I don't like it. It's not. I have never found it very useful. Worse. Yeah. That's probably. I don't know what cascara is made of. But you can have several different sources of the sulfate that is used by those microbes. The sulfurous amino acids, methionine and cysteine. So something like that could have. For instance, like if you eat Brazil nuts are really high. Well, they're really high in selenium. So Brazil nuts are like really good sort. Like if you are low in selenium, you can just pop like 2 or 3 Brazil nuts, and but those are selenoproteins. Like selenomethionine and selenocysteine, and selenomethionine and methionine are especially potent substrate for hydrogen sulfide malodorous producing microbes, and can result in some of the worst type of oral malodor, which is actually called methylmercaptan, which is methylated thiol. It's not actually hydrogen sulfide, but it's just related. It's related to that same process, reducing sulfate as a respiratory factor for those microbes. And so if you don't have carotene along with those, you can, and it's not even just, it's also not even just immediately while you're eating it. It's after the methionine starts circulating in your bloodstream, because oral pathogens penetrate through to the cardiovascular system. So if you eat, say for instance, Brazil nuts, and then you might present half an hour to an hour or more later with the really bad malodor, and to prevent that and to treat that, you then just chew on some carrot. Could carrot juice over the day frequently be good sources of the carotenes? Yes and no. One of the problems with carrot juicing is that the juicing process very often oxidizes the carotenoids that are in there. And there are people too who are also believe that carotenoids and vitamin A are toxic for us. And the problem with that idea is that it's not entirely wrong. Vitamin A and carotenoids are unsaturated molecules, and they are more susceptible to oxidation, and that's actually the point. Like vitamin C is highly susceptible to oxidation because it is an antioxidant. That's also how carotenes and vitamin A work. And those people's opinions of vitamin A and carotene is produced from the fact that there's so much supplemental vitamin A and carotene on the market, and if you use supplements of those, they can and usually do very easily produce harmful side effects because of their oxidation potential. So, because like for instance, when I talk about carotene being an antioxidant, the way it functions is by sacrificing itself in oxidative reactions. And so if you take supplemental forms of those, you are very likely to be ingesting the oxidized form, and then you're just introducing oxidative stress into your body. So I don't think carrot juice is a great way to do it, just because the juicing process so rapidly produces oxidized carotene. And when you eat whole food forms, it's not oxidized when it's in the whole food form. And then as you chew it in your mouth, there's not a lot of oxygen in there in the first place. So it's actually safer to use like whole food forms of those. It could possibly be effective. But then there's also the problem of carotenemia, which is where you get an excess of carotene and your skin turns orange. And that happens because our skin actually, that's not an accident. Our body uses carotenoids to protect our skin from the damaging potential of high energy wavelengths of light. This is the same function that carotenoids perform in plants. And we have evolved as an organism that when you eat carotenoids, they get transported to the keratinocytes in your skin to protect our skin from high energy wavelengths of light. Hello, Aaron. Welcome. The same way that they do in plants. And it's really funny too, because after I discovered this and started eating carotenes more frequently, I started having a lot more, my sweat started staining my clothes all the time. And I had to start wearing undershirts again to protect my nicer stuff. It's one of the reasons too, in like olden times, people wore undergarments all the time, and they were much more formal, but they were always white, because I think, hey fellas, welcome, nice to see you too. They were white so they could just bleach them and clean them more easily. And people that lived prior to industrial food systems we know from a fact that they had a lot more carotenes in their diets. And so they probably produced a lot more carotenoid in their sweat, which then stains, clothes and bed sheets. So there's that unfortunate side effect, but it's a demonstration of exactly what the purpose is of these nutrients. They are in the skin, not because they just got there, but because they're actively transported to the skin, and they serve the function of helping to protect our DNA and our tissues from the excitatory effects of high energy wavelengths of light. And also, some of them even actually protect us from infrared too, because the far infrared can actually be damaging too. And what carotenoids do is they absorb the light energy and then slowly dissipate it. Except the xanthophylls, I have discovered, I think, actively participate in the synthesis of vitamin D in the skin, because the xanthophylls, which are a class of carotenoids, they don't absorb the high energy wavelengths of light. They direct it in a direction, and they participate directly in the process of photosynthesis. And in our skin, they would do the same exact thing. And so if our skin is transporting xanthophylls to the skin, that means that our skin uses the xanthophylls to produce vitamin D. And so you have to have intake of vegetables to make vitamin D. Except, you could eat animal fat that has the xanthophylls in it, but that would require the animal to be grass-fed, free range, and also during the summertime. And so animals in the wintertime wouldn't have those either, unless they're fed like, hydroponically grown or, technologically grown plants that have leafy, that are green. Yeah, and so and so this and then the other part of this is that, like, and for instance too, so Ray, a lot of Ray's work specifically fixates on really important nutrients like vitamin K and vitamin E and some other things. But Ray was of this generation where supplementation was a brand new thing. You could, all of a sudden, you could actually buy individual nutrients at the store instead of the food sources that they came from. And, that was a really novel technological advancement and really impressive too, right? So if if you have a vitamin C deficiency or vitamin E deficiency, you could just go buy those and take them. The problem is that that actually is not how we get nutrients as a human being, though. And more important than that too is how those nutrients are important to host a healthy commensal microbiome instead of a pathogenic one. As a human species, we never had antibiotics, we never had supplements, and our body is not designed to survive with those as factors in our environment and diet. It just isn't. Those things are at most are 100 years. 100 years have been around for like 100 years or so. One of the problems with nutrient supplementation like vitamin K or vitamin E that people use to make up for the absence of these in their diet because they avoid vegetables or nuts or things like that is that those supplements are absorbed far too rapidly in the gut, and they don't reach the commensal microbiome that also is dependent on those nutrients. When you eat leafy greens and carrots and root vegetables, a lot of the nutrition that is in there does not get absorbed, and it gets passed down to the microbes that are also dependent on it. And microbes that respirate using vitamin K directly compete with and inhibit the microbes that cause health problems, like the amine producers that make histamine and tyramine and phenylethylamine. Histamine, a lot of people are familiar. Obviously, lots of people are familiar with histamine. It causes neurological stimulation. And so when you have histamine producers in your gut, you get a lot of agitation, irritation, and restlessness and insomnia. Histamine is one of the strongest inhibitors of sleep. And so one of the therapies to address excessive histamine production in the gut is not to take probiotics and supplements, is to just eat your fucking vegetables. If you provide them with a continuous stream of vitamin K, then your commensal microbiome thrives, and then they inhibit the pathogenic ones. Your mother struggles with feeling tired and low energy all the time. Yeah, Aaron. Any simple things she could do to feel energized? Well, Aaron, what you're talking about is chronic fatigue syndrome, Aaron, and it's actually very complex. And you're asking if there's a simple way to do it because a lot of people, like older generations, don't want to change their behavior and they don't want to fix their diet. When I first found out that I was allergic to common wheat, was in, God, it was so long ago now. I'm 44. This was back when I was 26. And it was like one of the first things that I ever figured out about what was going wrong with my health, because at the time I was having chronic sinus inflammation and chronic sinus infections. I was getting one sinus infection a month on average, and it was awful. And I kept getting antibiotics, and they kept coming back. And then I went on a date with the nurse, and he told me, he said, "Oh, you're probably allergic to gluten." And I was like, "Oh, tell me more about that." And, and unlike a lot of people who are just really resistant to hearing anyone's advice and listening, I wanted to get better. So I immediately cut out wheat out of my diet to test it. And at the time I had thought that my health problems were caused by meat or dairy. So I had cut both of those out of my diet, but it hadn't helped at all. And when I gave up common wheat, within 2 weeks, my sinus inflammation completely went away. And it was the first time in over a year that I had been able to breathe through both nostrils at the same time. It was fucking amazing. But so then I was so overjoyed with, and the other thing was too, was that my stomach aches went away. I had been having, and because of that was also a chronic thing. My stomach aches were so debilitating. Hello, Remnazuo. Sorry, Remnazuo. Hi, Jay. We're talking about we're primarily talking about vegetables or whatever else you guys want to talk about. So, because I've been noticing an uptick in people signing up for my work who have what I call forum diets that are extremely limiting and unfortunately actually causing problems, because of misinformation. And the ultimate point of it is that what I've been trying to communicate to people is that a lot of the things that you see on forums are not technically incorrect. What is incorrect is how to use that information, actually, how to apply that information in your daily life and to affect your diet. Oh, is it fun? Oh, that's cute. Oh, yeah, I don't know that one. I don't know that I've ever played a JRPG, but I've watched streamers play them before, but not a lot of them. Oh, thank you, Rod. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's nice to hear that. Thanks. I'm glad it helped. So, oh yeah. Aaron asked about his mother's chronic fatigue, or feeling tired all the time. So I asked. So I was so overjoyed about being relieved of my stomach aches and sinus infections that I immediately told my parents, because my dad drank Pepto-Bismol with every single meal for all of my life. It was like, you know, where a lot of families have like wine or tea with meals. Like my dad just, the Pepto-Bismol he had the oversized bottle in the fridge because his stomach was so bad. And I found out that it was actually eating wheat that was causing that. So I told them that this was back when I was 26. This was in 2016. No, was I 26 in 2016? 2006. I was 36 in 2016. This was back in 2006. Was the first time I told my dad and my mom that their stomach problems came from eating common wheat. And so initially I just completely cut out the wheat though, because I was so desperate to feel better, and the pain was, and it was so bad for me. And I was better, and the only times I ever had a resurgence of sinus inflammation or stomach aches was, PTSD flashbacks, yeah. So, was when I would mess up, or I would be weak, and like I'd be like, oh my god, I haven't had pizza for so long, and I'd be drunk and have a slice of 2 or 3 slices of pizza. Because in Los Angeles, there is this basically the tradition is that, or the ritual is that you go out and drink on the weekends, and when you're done at the club, you go to the pizza joint and get pizza while you sober up. And it's so good too. And so sometimes I wasn't strong enough, and I would have some, and it was only the times that I messed up or strayed from avoiding it that I would immediately have it would come right back. So I tried to help my parents with this problem, and they just like wouldn't do it. And like they just like, I don't even know if they tried to do it right away. It was probably like another 5 to 6 or 7 years later that they even started to try going without wheat. And then at that point, it was kind of this funny dynamic where they would be like, "Oh, Nathan, you'll be so proud of us. We've gone 2 weeks without eating any wheat." And I'd be, "Oh, great. That's fun." Even though I wasn't really like urging them to do it. I was just trying to help them. They can do with the information as they like. Yeah, it's just genetics. Aaron, that symptom, butt itching is a sign of parasites, actually. And so, yes, the short answer is my chapter on parasites, but we can get more into that too after this. So, and parasites, and like one of my more recent updates had my parasite addition to it, which is that a lot of people think that we don't deal with parasites in our industrial, modern, sanitized cultures, and it's not true at all. Mike mentioned when we first started the stream about abdominal distension, because that's a primary symptom of giardia. So even in developed countries when you see, especially older people, anyone that has really protruding gut, they have giardia. And giardia can be spread through unwashed hands, contaminated food. It doesn't necessarily only go through the water system, and also has become resistant to chlorination too. So, but anyway, so I would just keep urging them to try, going without wheat. Oh, sorry. So they'd say there was this dynamic where they'd be like, "Oh, Nathan, you'd be so proud of us. We've gone 2 weeks without wheat." And then not 5 minutes later in the same conversation, my dad would tell me about the great chocolate chip cookies that he just made a few days ago. And he's not using, and I mean that because he's not using like a replacement wheat. He still just has that other flour, the normal flour. And I'd be like, "You just told me that you went 2 weeks without gluten." "Oh yeah, but they were just cookies." Jesus Christ. So And then, so then it was like in probably around 2018 that one day they were like, "Oh, Nathan, we've got we found this like this woman that just that sells kamut flour, and we've been using the kamut flour instead of wheat, and it's so good. You should check out her work." And I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about? I have been trying to get you to use kamut for the last 10 years. What are you talking about?" It was really funny. And so like they eventually got there. They eventually changed their diet, but it really, I guess, I mean, maybe it had something to do with my constant urging for a decade to do it, but they eventually got there through somebody else. Because my parents don't respect me and they don't even listen to me. Because I don't belong to their religion. But yeah, anyway, so chronic fatigue is a problem of a lot of dietary, and Aaron, part of the reason that you're asking you phrased that question, because your mom doesn't really want to make the effort to change her ways and diet, and a lot of people are like that. I mean, I run into it all the time. I've just plain stopped trying to offer to help people that I see on the internet or come into contact with, because they usually just tell me to go fuck myself and don't even bother listening to what I have to say, which is the weirdest thing, because it's so strange, because like if someone gives you advice, you don't have to listen to it. Like just because someone tells you something doesn't mean that oh my god, they dominate your life now and you have to do what they say. Like that's not how anything works. Yeah, and there's a lot of annoying people that have no idea what they're talking about, and when they give you advice, you just say okay, or you can say thanks and you can just ignore it. It's like, it's not a big deal, but the people use that opportunity to assert themselves and engage control behaviors, like I talk about in my parenting book. So, I mean, I know why it happens, but a lot of people do not want to have to take the effort that is required to actually take care of their health. So, Aaron, the problem with like chronic fatigue is that there's a lot that's required to fix that, actually. You can do some things like eat more frequently and get sun exposure and eat more fruits and vegetables. Those are kind of generic things that you can do, but it's very specifically a combination of long-term colonization with ammonia-producing microbes. So you've got to suppress and address those, like I talk about in my book. And then also helping to resolve chronic hydrogen sulfide producers and restore copper homeostasis is a big way to do that. And that's why there's a chapter, it's called, what's it called? It's something about, permanent weight loss, posture and chronic fatigue. That chapter outlines the steps and then refers to the other chapters that are the foundational requisite for that. So I mean, that's the long answer is that it's actually not that easy to do. But then if you avoid wheat, like my philosophy is fairly, there's a lot, the book is really long, but fundamentally there's only 3 things that I tell people absolutely to avoid. Actually, no, 4. Common wheat, not just because of the gluten, also the iron fortification. Refined sources of polyunsaturated fats like vegetable oil, canola oil, fish oils, yogurt, not even strained yogurt. Everybody's like, oh, you can have the strained yogurt. No, you can't. When you have the strained yogurt, you're still ingesting the microbes that produce high amounts of lactic acid, and there's no faster way to lower your metabolic rate than to eat any kind of yogurt. And then also the 4th one is try to avoid toxic agrochemicals as much as possible by eating organic, and that's it. That's the fundamental. That's what you can't have. And then there's so much else. Like there's everything else you can have, as long as you also but if you want to like achieve better health results, then you have to put a little bit more effort into learning about that stuff too, though. But yeah. And then unfortunately a lot of people are just really set in their ways. But it's not just that people like what their food, or they don't want to make the effort. Acknowledging that there is a lot more complexity and complication and nuance to life and a set of behaviors and requirements that are not part of your worldview challenges your existing worldview. And that is the reason why people don't want to make changes. They do not want to admit that they are mortals and subjected to the laws of mortality, and that our biology is requires certain parameters to be true. It's much easier for people to believe that we are exempt from those laws of nature. Mentally, it's more comforting. There's a popular "Don't Die" man. Oh yeah, that rich guy. Well, Aaron, what's really funny? Yeah, he's a prime example of this problem. That guy, guess what, Aaron? That guy, he also grew up in Utah as a Mormon, just like I did. And his fear of death is a is the consequence of abusive religious organizations like Mormonism, where they indoctrinate you from the time that you're young to be afraid of death and loss and losing your family and things like that. So the way that Brian behaves in terms of death and mortality is a prime example. It's not unique to Mormonism. This is a condition of being human when we experience trauma. And there's lots of religions and cults, and you don't even have to be religious. It can still happen. But it's just more common in Mormonism because of the way that their philosophy works. They really try to frighten you about death and family and things like that. And so then, yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. So people that don't want to admit that we are subjected to mortal laws and limitations reach for those kinds of philosophies and delusional way of living life. And for people like me, you get, and probably many of you too, I know, because a lot of people come to my work when they are very ill and can't find any solution. The desperation and the brush with death and the severity of your illness forces you to realize that we do have limitations, and that there are cause and consequence, and we all require certain exact parameters and conditions in order to actually be alive. Yeah. And then you can always make informed decisions and effective decisions, but we can never control biology. And that's what fear does. Fear causes people like that Brian guy to try to control things that we actually cannot control. So then you do really psycho shit, like manipulate your son into giving him your blood. That's what that guy does. Which is fucking nuts, because also it's not like an emergency situation where he needs blood. It's like he's getting his son to donate his blood to him on a regular basis, and that's really bad, especially for a developing, growing young man. Every time, and also I think I talked about this in the last stream, was that blood donation is not a good way to maintain health. It's still a great social service to do, and you should still give blood as a form of service, to help people that need it. But using it as a way to get rid of iron out of your blood is so dumb, because when you give blood, you're not just giving iron, you're giving everything else that's used to make blood, and all the nutrients that are in that blood that you're giving. And it can actually make problems worse. And also, iron excess is not mediated by the absence of bloodletting. It is mediated by biological pathways that increase the absorption and retention of iron. And unless you address those factors, you can never resolve iron excess. Certainly not through giving blood. So, yeah, Rem, he it was so weird. He claims, I think I saw something recently, he claimed he stopped doing that and is now using synthetic additions to his blood, which is a lot better. But it's still a fucking psycho thing to be doing. And number one, just being so afraid of aging and death as that is so stressful. And what happens, like, especially in a lot of religious cults and organizations like Mormonism, the people that belong to it, they end up spending all of their waking moment fixated on the end and death and the afterlife, and they completely miss out on being present in their current lives, and they dissociate from relationships. And you can see it too if you're not yourself also highly traumatized. When you are with those people, they don't make eye contact. They talk about really shallow topics. And it always swings back to religion and the afterlife, because that's their coping mechanism with dealing with that much fear. And so, and when you, and also when you, and so when you operate on, when you operate from a perspective of fear, informed by fear, you become ineffective, because usually fear is reactionary. So like that Brian guy, like he obviously dyes his hair. Like a lot of the things that he does or appears is because he's a billionaire that can afford hair plugs and plastic surgery and skin treatments that artificially smooth over the skin, and none of that actually improves your health. It's just aesthetic. So so you're not effective in your decision making process, because it's so much of it is informed by insecurity and fear. And then also, this is what happens with with a lot of forums, is the same people. Actually, this is really funny too, because I witnessed and heard, from what I heard, it's like when Ray died, a lot of the people that were using his work to run forums and participate in forums completely abandoned his work immediately. And the reason was because he died. A lot of the people that are in those forums are just as afraid of death as Brian is. And so that's the entire thrust of their efforts, is to try to avoid death, which by extension is then also avoiding disease and aging. And so they were hoping that Ray would live a very, very long life, which would then reinforce their coping mechanisms and delusion that they could avoid death too. So as soon as he died, that upended and subverted their perspective of life and their worldview. So then they just abandoned him, because he was serving as a way to support those control mechanisms. But yeah, so this is also what informs and involves the whole anti-vegetable stance that a lot of people have too, is because when you are possessed with the obsession or idea that you can actually control biology and mortality, you desperately search for the one thing or the thing that is going to do that. So you constantly are obsessing about, oh, what supplements I need to take, and at what time do I need to take them, and what foods do I absolutely need to avoid, and oh my God, this thing's going to hurt me too. All this fear that's behind all of the behavior prevents you from actually seeing what you actually need to do, which is to take care of the body, not to force it to do what you want, which are two completely different things. When you believe that you can force the body to do what you want, you end up like that Brian guy. When you instead take care of the body, you end up like me, having a very nice life where I enjoy my life and I eat really well and I'm happy all the time. And stuff like that. So yeah. Is avocado oil fried things good to eat? Avocado oil is too high in polyunsaturated fats to be a regular thing in the diet. And I'll also tell you, I think Aaron, you might have heard, a lot of you might have heard about how one of my nephews had a brain tumor when he was a child, before he could even speak. He started like grabbing his head, and he fell over one time, and they took him to the hospital, and he had a tumor in his brain that was almost the size of an apple. And luckily he didn't die. He had an operation. There was a complication during the operation that damaged some of his tissue, but he actually did really well. And he doesn't have any brain damage to this day, which is really surprising. But I suspect that part of the reason that he got that was because his mother was of the opinion that sugar is bad for you. So she wasn't giving her kids very much fruit, which is one of the most psycho developments of and extensions of this whole like sugar's bad for you thing, is people extend it to fruit too, which is just fucking psycho. And instead was giving him like avocados all the time. Like I think he got like an avocado every day. Avocados are not bad for you. They're really high in potassium, and I would never turn down guacamole. I mean, like, are you kidding? And I put avocado on food too, quite a bit. But I mean, a bit, not quite a bit, but I do. I'll have like chilaquiles and put an avocado on top, or during the summertime, if I'm having salad, I'll usually include an avocado in there. But I would not have it in abundance either, and not have it frequently. And I also would not give avocado to children regularly. Totally can have guacamole. Like if you want to give your kids guacamole on the weekend with some chips, totally awesome. But I would not use it as a health food and staple. I'd use it more as like a treat. But definitely, I don't think avocado oil is good. Instead, chips made out of like coconut oil and olive oil, much better. Even high oleic sunflower oil, not regular sunflower oil, but specifically high oleic sunflower oil would also be probably okay. What'd you say? You said 5 degrees lower about something. I don't know what you mean. Oh, lowered his. Oh, sorry, I didn't see the last of that question. Whose degrees? Oh, it lowered his. What? He lowered his body temperature. That's interesting. I didn't know about that, but I know exactly why he's doing that and what the thought process came from. There's been research on like on worms. You know those C. elegans. That is a common subject of scientific study. When they lower their temperature, they actually live longer. And then really stupid fucking people apply that to human physiology too. And people think, and part of the reason they think that is because people that we idealize, like athletes, very often have a lower body temperature. So then they make the leap that a lower body temperature means healthier. And that's so fucking wrong. It's not even close to correct. Part of the reason that athletes are very often cold is because they have little body fat, so they lose heat faster than people who have some fat on them. It's so dumb. And one of the purposes of fat is to insulate your body against the loss of heat, because human mammalian physiology depends so much on really high body temperature. Everyone talks about how the average core human body temperature is 98.6 Fahrenheit. That's really fucking high. Like if it's 96 degrees outside, and people's air conditioning power gets shut off, like a lot of people actually die from that kind of temperature because it is so high. But that is how hot the interior of our bodies needs to be in order for your cells to function correctly. But also at the same time, that's not the peak. Because that number gets thrown around, everyone thinks that, if they get close to 98.6, then they're fine. That's the average temperature of the body. And average means that there are numbers both below and above that. Every day, your body actually peaks around 99 or even more. And sorry, everybody who is in the metric system, I don't off the top of my head. Do you guys? What's the 98.6 equivalent of in centigrade? 99 degrees. It's basically 100 degrees. 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's so fucking hot. Like literally, it is so hot. 37. Thanks, Aaron. I should know this. I work. Most of the people I coach actually are not even in the U.S. and I just don't remember the number all the time. Yeah, because that's right. Because I usually what the higher equivalent for people in Celsius is 37.2. That's actually the number that you have to aim for every day when you're rehabilitating your metabolic rate. It's not just 37. It's not just 98.6. That's just the average. So, but because of these studies on worms and what happens to athletes when they engage in excessive exercise is that as a result, you lose body heat because you're working out so much, you're consuming so much fuel, you're losing so much body fat that your body then has a difficult time retaining heat to the core. And this is really obvious too in reflection of how our body works. one of the functions of adrenaline, which is a stress hormone, which is also elicited by excessive exercise and bad eating habits, is that it cuts off peripheral circulation so that you reduce heat transfer to the outside of the body. That therefore helps to retain more heat to the core. And if your body is doing that in response to exercise and in response to dieting behaviors, it means that your body is concerned with losing too much heat. And why is that the case? It's because we have to have really hot bodies in order for our human mammalian physiology to function correctly. And so when you look at that, when you look at people like him that do these extreme things to their body and diets in ideological worship of athletes and other people like that, it's misinformation. It is a bad reading of what's going on there. So yeah. So you disagree with Brian, he does not seem unhealthy. Well, no, he does, because the thing is, when you're looking, like what I mentioned earlier, is like he obviously dyes his hair, he gets plastic surgery. Yeah, he's fit, he works out every day, but that is an illusion. That does not mean, like, people equate leanness with being healthy. But the problem is that, and there's a study that proves this too, that there's probably several studies, that people who do not gain weight or do not have fat on their body are more likely to die from sudden health stress, like things like heart attacks and stroke and stuff like that, than people that do have fat on their body. And a lot of that has to do with with how fat is a thermoregulatory function. It also is a storage site for important fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin A and vitamin D. So, for instance, if Brian encounters a stress event in the future where his body completely runs out of hormones, he won't have any vitamin A storage in his fat to make more hormones, and so he'll just die. Because hormones, like cortisol, is a hormone. It is a hormone made from dietary fats. So people like that don't produce as much testosterone. And, being a billionaire, he probably actually injects himself with testosterone. He probably has it as a supplement. And I don't ever have to do that. And I'm a few years older than he is, I think. Oh, actually, no, I don't remember. I may be wrong. He might be older than me. I don't remember. But I don't have to take testosterone. I have a great libido. I don't have to dye my hair. I could. I have a lot of gray. But I think I look great with gray hair, and he doesn't. He's so insecure. I don't consider that healthy. People who are really neurotic about their appearance also have really high stress hormones, and those high stress hormones exaggerate and drive the stress that underlies the stimulus for those behaviors and stuff. Ray talks about this too. I think I never heard him say this, but someone else told me that he did. Ray talked about how because I think he said it in an interview or something, and most of the stuff I've consumed of his is all his written stuff. He talked about how people with high energy production are calmer and less stressed out. I don't remember how he phrased it, but somebody told me he said something like that. Wait, oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, so yeah, no, but because that's the problem with health, because people, that's what the whole problem is people see athletes and we idealize athletes, and because I have a whole chapter in my book on this. It's the chapter on that genetics do not create sexual attraction, that diet does. And this is an aspect of human evolutionary psychology where we feel drawn to people that present with good features that look attractive. It's not because we're interested in acquiring their genes. You know, like women are not attracted to men because they want their sperm. And men aren't attracted to women because they want their partner to carry healthy children genetically. It's because people that are good looking in evolutionary terms usually have access to resources. That's why we find ourselves attracted to people who are attractive, because they have access to either food resources or community resources or knowledge and behaviors that then facilitate the optimal expression of their genes. And that's why we're attracted to them. And that's why a lot of us are not attracted to people that are a lot older than us. The people that are like in their 70s and 80s, they have the same genes that they had when they were in their 20s, right? But you don't, because we're biologically evolved to be attracted to people that have access to resources that make them healthy. So somebody that has a lot of money can replicate that through plastic surgery, hair dye, hair implants. Not a single one of the billionaire class that have hair had it when they were in their 20s and 30s. You see old pictures of them when they were completely bald on the top of their fucking head, and now they have hair. It didn't come because they got healthier. It came because they bought it. And so you can fake that stuff. And that's why women dye their hair too, because you feel this pressure to be sexually attractive. But it has nothing to do with genetics. It has everything to do with access to food and nutrition and behaviors that help your body like maintain a healthy microbiome, because we are so dependent, like I was talking about earlier in the stream, we are so dependent on a commensal microbiome to be able to break down, like Ray Peat said, plants are healthier than animal products, but they're harder to break down. So in order to actually benefit from the healthiest food that is available to you, you have to have also a good microbiome. So this is why a lot of really attractive people grow up with behaviors or in environments where they're outside all the time, because the microbiome is kind of one of the most important factors that the microbiome is dependent on is vitamin D. And you do not get vitamin D from food or supplements. A lot of people don't know that when you induce chronic light deficiency, your body automatically destroys vitamin D through the role of 24-hydroxylase, because vitamin D helps raise the metabolic rate during conditions that replicate wintertime and other periods when food is not widely available in the environment. The body down regulates vitamin D as an evolutionary adaptive survival mechanism. So you can't even just take vitamin D to replicate that. So you get people that are surfers that grow up in Hawaii and California, or people that are just outdoors all the time because they're active. They look good because they're out in the sun all the time. And they get vitamin D, and then that vitamin D is shared with the microbiome that then better breaks down the food. And not only that, they also produce an abundance of B vitamins and short-chain fatty acids that are also required for us to live, to thrive. So this is why vegetables, the way to deal with the problems that are in plant foods is not to avoid them. It is to restore your ability. It's to properly prepare them, like soaking beans and nuts and stuff like that, and cooking foods that are really difficult to break down, and then supporting your microbiome, which is primarily achieved through the whole vitamin D, archaea, B12 pathway that I talk about in my book. And so then what happens is the important nutrients that like Ray talks about, vitamin K and vitamin E, you just get it in your diet anyway. And you don't have to take the supplements, and the food form is superior because it also then later transits all the way down into your gut, where it supports directly your microbiome. And, for instance, too, the microbiome make vitamin K2 out of K1, which is more potent than K1. And there are 13 forms of it that we know of, and you can't replicate that with a supplement. A lot of people take K1, K2, and you can take a supplement, that's fine, but it's not going to replicate the role of your microbiome producing that from the food that you eat, which also, by the way, supplies their production of B vitamins that we're also dependent on. Through my work, I've discovered that ultimately every single B vitamin except for B3 is produced in our gut, entirely dependent on first on vitamin D, then B12, and then they make B1 and B2 and B5 and B6. And B3 is made in our body from dietary tryptophan, but you can also get it from food. But yeah. Have I heard of effervescent drink? Oh, Rem, what? Sorry, I was talking too long, Rem. I don't know what you meant by 86 years. 86 years of life. Sorry. Have I heard of effervescent drink? Is a digestive aid using sodium bicarbonate lemon? No, I mean not specifically, but that's just like Alka-Seltzer, right? Because when you mix sodium bicarbonate and lemon, you get carbon dioxide released in the water, which is fun. I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah, and carbon dioxide is great. A lot of people think that sodas are bad for you because of the CO2 in them. No, actually, the opposite is true. CO2 is really important for a lot of things. CO2 even helps your body detoxify ammonia. So, yeah. That would be good. That'd be yummy. Fruits and vegetables that have thick skin is okay to eat non-organic when peeled, like bananas, orange, avocado. Yeah. Like maybe I try to eat organic as much as possible, but where I live also I don't live close to an organic store. So a lot of the organic things I eat, I get either delivered here or I have to travel across town to get them. And so I've kind of become lazy about that. And it hasn't really been a problem. I avoid like for instance, like one of the foods that's most problematic eating non-organic are potatoes, because potatoes actually retain quite a bit of the herbicide that is applied to the ground that they grow in. And so if you just straight up eat non-organic potatoes, it can actually completely wipe out your microbiome. And so it can be really apparent when you get exposed to like those agrochemicals. And one strategy I've tried when I've really wanted potatoes, but I didn't want to go across town, was to peel the potatoes and then let them sit in a bowl of water for about 5 minutes, or pre-boil them. Like if I was making mashed potatoes, if you boil them, then the herbicide, a lot of it probably gets lost in the water. It won't if they're fat soluble toxins, but which there are a lot of, but the water soluble ones will get taken out, and then you dump that water out, and then you can have them. And so I didn't really notice a big problem when I was doing that actually. So there's a little hack. And so yeah, eating like and then some farmers they only spray crops during the growth phase, and then they avoid spraying them through the last several weeks. But farming and industrial farming especially has started to get away from that. In fact, some non-organic farmers literally use pesticide or herbicides to actually dry the plant and kill it faster. Like they do that with grains especially. And so you actually get a lot more toxic residue on the end product than you would have even 20 years ago, even though they were still using the same chemicals. This is also about when you apply them and how much you apply. So yeah, I mean, yeah, you're probably gonna be fine if you eat. I wouldn't have strawberries I would never have strawberries that aren't organic. And potatoes, I would make a big effort to peel them. I've also noticed though too, like I've been eating non-organic greens, and I don't get headaches from the nitrate like I used to. So I think I've done a really good job at like restoring my stomach acid, because stomach acid it neutralizes and gastric juice contains vitamin C as well. And so if you restore stomach acid and vitamin C, then nitrates are reduced chemically, not by quantity, I mean chemical reduction. And then they can't be used by nitrate reducing bacteria like Streptomyces that produce ammonia in your gut that can contribute to cancer and migraines. And I haven't had a migraine now in like half a year or more. So yeah. Is corn, rice, popcorn good to eat? It's fine to eat, but corn needs to be treated properly. Nixtamalization. It's a process where corn is treated with an alkali like calcium hydroxide, which is also called lime. And popcorn, by its definition, you can't treat with that. It wouldn't then pop. So you don't really get all the nutrition when you eat popcorn or non-nixtamalized corn. So if you have if you eat corn products like corn tortillas or cornbread or, any of that, you should look on the package and make sure that it contains either like calcium hydroxide or it'll say lime. And it doesn't mean lime the fruit. It means lime as in calcium hydroxide, as in limestone. And so if it has that on the package, then it's better to eat. Rice is great to eat, but if it's whole grain, soak it for a day or more so that it sprouts. And by sprouting, I don't mean actually growing roots. That's longer than you need to do it for. Just to help the cut down on the phytate content so that it's more nutritious. Yeah, but rice is good. Rice is a little bit. I used to have a bit more problem with it when I was really sick, but ever since I've gotten a lot better, I don't usually ever have any problem with rice. Again, a lot of this is digestion, your digestive ability, whether you possess enough microbes. If somebody's taking a lot of antibiotics or they're on chemotherapy, you're not going to be able to break down plant foods very well either, because you need that microbiome intact to be able to do that. So it kind of depends on your situation. But if you and there's no faster way to restore your microbiome than with fruit and sugar together. And then also accounting for the other factors like I talk about in my book. Yeah. And then that gives you a better ability to break it down. But regardless, we can't liberate. I don't remember, because I really haven't fixated on this research, whether or not the nixtamalization process releases its niacin content or its tryptophan content, because we make niacin from tryptophan. But either way, there used to be this big problem around the southern United States way back when, called a disease called pellagra, which comes from not having enough niacin or tryptophan in your diet. And it was because as white colonialist Europeans killed off all the native people that were living here, they took over their food sources, but they didn't have the knowledge to actually prepare them properly. So native peoples here in the Americas have known for, millennia, that in order to actually eat corn, you had to nixtamalize it. But white people didn't know that. So when their diet consisted mostly of corn, they all got pellagra because they killed everybody that knew that you had to actually process it properly. And so then they had lots of disease because of that. We say a person is hot and humans get their mitochondria only from their mothers. Yeah. I wonder if there's something instinctual about that, and an attractive man is called cool. Well, not in the gay community. I call hot guys hot. I think if you're gay, then maybe we apply that same masculine usage to other guys instead of women. If only humans get their mitochondria only from their mothers. I don't know. I've never thought about that or looked into it. Probably. What's really interesting about mitochondria, though, is that they appear to be originated from assimilated bacteria, like way back when we were still like unicellular organisms. Our ancient ancestors subsumed another species of bacteria or microbe, and they fused to become symbiotic. And the reason, and because mitochondria have their own DNA that's separate from our nuclear DNA, and mitochondria also are built and resemble bacteria anyway. So it's very likely that mitochondria originated from, well, we originated from microbes too, but the mitochondria specific also was just a different type of microbe. And then once they fused together, they became super powerful and started taking over the planet. Yeah, but I don't know necessarily how that would play into instincts at all, that I'm aware of. Because like, as a gay man, I'm definitely attracted to men and not women. But I don't know. Thoughts on chia seed gelatinizing or resistant starch like rigid pasta? Yeah, I've seen a lot of papers, science, and also just general content in the media sphere on resistant starch and promoting the microbiome. And I have tried those things in the past, but they did not do me any good. And I think the reason that they didn't, like, if in a controlled environment, like in a study, you set it up and then you get certain results, like, is usually very specific to a specific environment, like a healthy gut, or they'll reproduce like a Crohn's disease gut, or any number of different diabetics, any number of different environment where that where the study is then executed. And so things like that are not always actually applicable universally. And I think the reason that resistant starch and those kind of, that gelatinization, yeah, like one of the things is that, like, if you cook potato and then let it cool down again, then the starch reforms into resistant type. That doing that kind of stuff, like, never had any benefit on me. And I think it's because when you have like gut problems, it's because the gut becomes dominated by opportunistic pathogens that destabilize the local microbiome. So if you had a healthy microbiome, quote unquote, and then you used resistant starch, you would get things like an improvement in the species that are there, in short chain fatty acid production and things like that. But the reason is only because they're just getting the nutrients that would otherwise be absorbed. Because when it's not resistant starch, when you cook it, and the body absorbs it mostly, so then the microbiome is deprived of it. But that doesn't control for opportunistic microbes like those that produce ammonia, that then destabilizes the commensal microbiome. So if you instead replicated that study, but you also then inoculated the medium with like Heliobacter pylori, which is one of the major pathogenic ammonia producers in the human gut, or in a lot of animals, then the resistant starch probably wouldn't actually have that same benefit. So in my practical experience, I did not benefit from that stuff, especially from the amount of effort that was required to do that. it didn't even do anything for me, and it was a lot of work anyway. And it was also very specific, Mike, like having to find what foods have resistant starch and which don't, and whether or not they might work or not. The work, it just didn't pay off at all. So I didn't even like continue pursuing that angle. What I ended up finding, Mike, was when I discovered that tannin inhibited ammonia producers in the gut. Not that I didn't discover, I learned through a study that tannin inhibits ammonia producers, but I discovered that it is necessary to have in your diet, in the gut, to remodel the gut microbiome. Hello, Evelina. Welcome. Nice to see you. That had so much more of an impact on my gut health than a lot of the other stuff I had done previously, including using things like resistant starch and all these little hacks. Oh, also too, like, I hate the people that are all about leptin and ghrelin and the hunger hormones. That kind of stuff is such a product of this idea that we control biology. Like people, scientists or influencers getting out there and saying like, oh well, your leptin is dysregulated and your ghrelin, and so you have to eat in a certain pattern in order to reduce your ghrelin. That's so fucking dumb. Like ghrelin is just a mediator of signals of whether you're hungry or not. You can't manipulate it. It's supposed to work like that. Um, you know. So like, yeah. Anyway, I just found that all that stuff like way too much work and didn't pay off at all. So like I've got way more benefit from tannin. And the other interesting thing about tannin is that microbes eat tannin. So they also produce, like, tannin is what resistant starch is supposed to be in the popular zeitgeist lexicon, whatever. Tannin is a food source for our commensal microbiome. And because tannin also directly inhibits pathogens like ammonia producers, it's both medicinal in suppressing those pathogens while also actively being a prebiotic for the healthy microbes. In fact, actually, this is a reason why I also figured out, a lot of you guys know about my article on coffee and how to make good coffee, and it's on my website in the food section if you don't. Around 2020, I all of a sudden stopped being able to enjoy my coffee. Every time I was having the coffee, I felt really bad, like kind of hurting. And also it was starting to disrupt my sleep, which it had never done before either. And what I realized was that the aerated water, because when you turn on your sink and foamy water falls out, that's aeration. It oxygenates the water like tremendously. And when you use oxygenated water in a beverage that's also high in prebiotics, like coffee is, and coffee is not as high in tannin as tea, because I wasn't having that problem from tea, but I was having it from coffee. And when you add lots of oxygen into a high prebiotic polyphenol beverage or medium like that, it really aggressively feeds aerobic bacteria in your gut instead of the anaerobic bacteria that you need to be feeding. And so that's how I realized that oxygenating coffee was actually detrimental to your ability to use coffee therapeutically, and then wrote that article and all that stuff. And then I realized that you gotta actually dispense your water from the faucet when you're making coffee very slowly so that it doesn't aerate, or just remove the filter altogether. But yeah, but that's like, that helped inform my later discovery that tannin was required in the diet to suppress ammonia producers in the gut because of that experience. Yeah. And then also too, I mean, just using tea and tannins and like having like, hazelnuts all the time or almonds, that's just a lot easier than, making chia seed gelatin and cooking and then cooling down potatoes and all those kinds of things. And, those are all just like, yeah. With grocery prices about to increase due to tariffs, what are your most cost-effective items? I have a giant bag of pinto beans. It's like 50 pounds of pinto beans in my closet as a emergency backup. It's not great to have legumes in high quantities all the time, but they are really yummy. And if you soak them enough prior to making them, that cuts down on their phytate content. And then if you cook them really well, that makes them more digestible. And they're also really yummy, and they just store really well. I also bought some extra bags of spelt flour so that I can make bread if those prices skyrocket. They're all non-perishable, but I have some canned. I have canned like tomatoes and frozen green beans, and frozen spinach. I have frozen spinach in my freezer, but then I buy fresh when I go to the store now. Actually, or sometimes some recipes I prefer frozen, so I'll buy more for that, so that I'm not using my storage. So that if grocery prices or things supply interruptions occur, that I won't have to suffer too much from that. God willing, fingers crossed. Praying for everybody is affected by this madness. Your grandpa got hospitalized. He has severe pneumonia. Is there something he can do to relieve? That's a little beyond my not just my ability but also my purview, Aaron. I can't really help people that are having immediate emergency problems. When you require hospital treatment, that's kind of beyond doing dietary things. And there's a lot. I mean, you have to, if you're susceptible to immune, but also older people, like when you get to a point where you're very old, you have aging is a consequence of very long-term colonization with opportunistic microbes. For instance, all of our grandparents, people that are 70, 80, 90, they've been colonized with like ammonia producers and hydrogen sulfide producers since they were in their 20s. And when you start to get to a point where in your aging, where all of your hair goes gray and you lose body mass, that is a consequence of very severe disruption to lots of necessary metabolic pathways, like immunity and glycoprotein production, cholesterol production, and so you can't just fix and reverse those pathways once you get to a certain age. It requires very specific therapy that takes a long time to do, that you're not going to get when you're that age and suffering from those kinds of conditions. So he has to be taken care of first by the hospital. Then if and when he recovers, then if he wants to, he can do things like change his diet. But, obviously, like we've talked about too, lots of people aren't willing to, don't care to get better, don't need to. Everybody reaches the end of their life. While it's really, sad, part of the reason that it affects us so much is a testament to how much of an impact they had on your life. Death is not a bad thing. Death takes us into whatever the next stage of life is. If death did not exist, neither would we. Some people might think that would be a better thing. I tried to kill myself like twice. Life is really hard. There's a lot of terrible, as we're witnessing even now, there's lots of terrible things that happen in life. And the way to deal with those is not to try to desperately prevent those things from happening, because very oftentimes we can't. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if a lot of these billionaires chasing the cure to death were successful in prolonging human life, even to like 1,000 years. Let's say that Brian guy does get his wish and he lives for 1,000 years. He's still going to be terrified of death the entire fucking time. because even if you are really healthy, you can't stop, say, the plane that you're in from crashing into a Black Hawk helicopter and all of you drowning in the icy cold Potomac River. You cannot prevent mortality, and it doesn't matter. No matter how much we learn scientifically, that will never happen. Part of the point of being alive is to experience the limits of mortality just as much as the happy parts. That they are the point. The experience of loss is such a deeply impactful thing to go through, and that is the point of it, that we experience the full breadth of living, not just the things that make us feel good. It doesn't mean you should never go searching out bad experiences. But also, like, when people are aging and dying, it's a very special moment where, they're reaching the conclusion of their long life, and all the things that they've done and contributed to the world, and and their life is special. And life isn't made unspecial by losing people or mortality. In fact, it makes it more special. But like I mentioned, we wouldn't, if death wasn't a concept. And actually, it's really funny too, Aaron. Every single organism that has lived on the earth since the history of time has died or will die. There's not a single organism that has cheated death. And yet, and not even a single human being, but in spite of the ubiquity of the experience, you get people like Brian acting like death is the worst thing that could ever possibly happen. And there's a lot worse things that can happen in life than death. The only reason that it's scary or frightening is because of your unresolved traumatic experiences growing up in which you were taught that death is bad, where it gives you stress, and because it is a primal manifestation of the reality that we do not control mortality. And that for a lot of people, the absence of that control directly stimulates and triggers past experiences of trauma, where you believe that your ability to that you need not only that you need to control certain things in life, but that you can, and neither are true. Taking care of your body is yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Aaron. I didn't mean to like say you were. But death is often uncomfortable for people. So like, you know, like I had a really sweet guy message me a long time ago who signed up for coaching, and his dad was at the end of his life and wanted to know how he could turn it around. And instead I just coached him through it instead of like trying to fix it. 'Cause his dad was like really old and they clearly had a really special relationship, you know? And it's sad to, you know, lose that kind of thing. But the loss of it also does not mean that the impact and the experience you had, it doesn't invalidate it all. It doesn't matter if somebody dies. No, there's no power in the universe that can erase the fact that they did exist and what they did and their experience on their own personal experience, and also their experience on their impact and effect on other people. So people, you know, everybody that comes to me who like doesn't eat vegetables anymore because they're afraid of getting fat and sick and dying, are now fat and sick and dying because they didn't eat their vegetables, because they heard that, you know, fiber is bad for your gut and all this stuff. And, you know, yeah, and fiber, like too much fiber can be aggravating, irritating to the gut. The solution isn't to avoid it. Neither opposite to people that believe fiber is great for you, go take a supplement of psyllium husk every day. That's fucking nuts. That's not part of our dietary. That's not part of our diet. Don't do that shit. You just rationally mind it, because that's why when we're absolutely terrified of reality, we end up making irrational decisions because they're not informed by logic and facts. They're informed by emotion and fear, and wrong facts too, like the idea that you can control death, you know, somehow. So yeah, I hope your grandpa gets better. You know, once he does, if he's open to it, you can introduce him to the concepts in my book, you know, how the diet works, how the gut works, B12. You know, you can't take an old person like your grandpa though and stick him in the sun. They lost their ability to make vitamin D a long time ago. So you have to start at like the very fundamental principles. Your guitar teacher had talked about certain food effects, right hand and left hand coordination. I understand endorphins have asymmetric effects on the body. Is cystic fibrosis asymmetrical? In my experience, no. Cystic fibrosis has not been asymmetrical at all, but my condition is also not very severe. Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah. I've never looked into that. I've just always been more concerned with not dying because my cancer and thyroid. So I was just focusing on very, very fundamental aspects of health than things like asymmetry in the body. Is there a difference in oils from espresso and drip coffee? I don't think so. Unless the drip coffee is paper filtered, then it won't really have the oils at all. Espresso is usually done through like a metal sieve, so it'll contain all the oils. So there could be, yes. The answer is yes, if the drip is. But there's also metal sieves. Actually, if you have a drip coffee maker and you don't know about this, I discovered that you can just buy metal sieves for it, and then you can just rinse them out instead of having to go through paper filters all the time. And also, it tastes much better because the paper will filter out the oils. And I like the flavor and taste of the oils, and the oils probably actually have a beneficial effect too. So Um, I do have regular hazelnuts. I don't really sprout them because I'm lazy. I like them. I will roast them though. I love roasted hazelnuts. Nuts you do not need to soak and sprout as much as you do whole grains and legumes. Oh well, not all legumes. Like for instance, like have you ever noticed how like when you eat peas, they very often just go right through you? um, that isn't so much a function of sprouting them as it is the availability of B12 to the microbiome, like I talk about in my book. And so if you are producing vitamin D and you have plenty of local B12 production, you'll digest the peas. Or if you add B12 to the food, they'll get digested. So you don't necessarily need to like sprout peas, but I always sprout whole grains if I'm going to use them. Like very often when I cook with rice, I use brown rice and I soak it for about at least 12 hours, if not 24. And yeah, so because grains are even less digestible, but nuts, we evolved with a lot of nuts in the environment, and nuts are less because nuts very often have a hard shell. They're designed as nature by nature for the interior of the fruit, the flesh of the nut to not be as bad for you as like grains and legumes sometimes, and some certain types of legumes. Yeah, so I don't really do that. No, I'll just throw a handful in my mouth and eat them. Conspiracy. You think Musk is obsessed with the letter X because he's secretly preparing for a Kessler event, which can only happen for next class? However, you've lost the plot. That's funny. I don't know what a Kessler event is. I like space, but I just haven't really done that. Yeah, is that when you like? Is that when like a super massive radiological event gets directed at our planet? Um, talk about fear. Fear of doomsday. Excuse me. Fear of doom and comet and asteroid crashes and impacts. Yeah, that can be very stressful. And when you have also, because obviously Elon is on the spectrum. Being on the spectrum changes your endocrine system considerably, and so you can experience a lot higher stress from fear and other stressful stimuli than might a person who's not. Which I'm talking about from personal experience. It's really funny too. As somebody who's autistic, I tend to talk about autistic people like I'm not one of us, because that is literally a characteristic of being autistic, is like not having language and association with people the way that you do when you're not autistic. Yeah. And so yeah, like and then because he has the money to do it, it really reinforces his behavior then, instead of helping to resolve it. Because what are you going to do if we get hit by something like that? Are you going to be the last person on the earth? That sounds so dumb. That's why like what that Brian guy wants, like to live forever. That sounds awful. Like, really think about it. Like, you're gonna live for 1,000 years. You're gonna do this for 1,000 years. I mean, if I was like Gandalf, and like you have access to to the supernatural and divine realms, living for a really long time might be really cool. But just as a human being, like, you're not going to experience the end of life that's so vital to actually living. But they're not going to anyway, because it's not possible. But when you follow that through, if you follow through to its end and natural conclusion, are you going to live for until the sun in 4 billion years, when the sun grows so large it consumes our entire planet? I mean, it's so dumb and illogical. Just let life and nature go the way that it always has. We don't know what the next step is in life, after life. A lot of people try to figure that out as a way to make themselves feel comfortable, but in reality, it actually just makes them delusional and crazy and fearful, even more fearful. Um, and yeah. But obviously, I'm talking a lot about this too, as if like you can just make that decision to not be crazy like that. When in fact, as a lot of you know, in order to do that, you actually have to do inventory therapy to get there. Oh, Avelina, you asked me a question, but I missed. Where did that go? Did I miss that long ago? Is it no longer in here? Can you unsend chats? Sorry, Avelina. Oh, also, you guys, Avelina, if you're still here. Oh, okay. Yeah. Ask it again if you want. Sorry, I take a long time. I ramble and talk a lot, so I sometimes take a long time to get to them. If you want, if there's something you want to know the answer to, go ahead and ask. Patagonia billionaire is a billionaire for going nonprofit. Oh yeah, Mike. They are, but actually, it's also actually kind of a con. The way that they're doing that actually helps to preserve their fortune by making it non-taxable. So it's actually not as great as it sounds, unfortunately. Espresso pods coffee is okay to drink. It is, but those are also really wasteful and lots of plastic. You should just grind your own beans. Fresh coffee is also better. And then you don't waste as much plastic. Protein powder I'd recommend. I don't consume protein powder regularly, Aaron, actually. I used it when I was recovering from cancer. And then otherwise, I have a big bucket of pea protein, and in the past I've had casein on hand, and I will use that I will add that protein to a meal like soup or something like that if I'm not getting protein and I feel like I need it. Oh, but you guys, there's this really interesting. Oh, here, I'll answer your question, Evelyn, and then as I tell you that. You're wondering how you can increase satiety, especially in the morning. Oh yeah, actually, what I was going to tell you might actually help inform that. Mention the fruit smoothie for breakfast. I do not have a fruit smoothie for breakfast. Sometimes I have a fruit smoothie for breakfast. I don't have a regular pattern of any eating behaviors. I just eat whatever the fuck I want. You're hungry within an hour. Yeah. Okay. So, but because Avelina, the reason that that's happening is because, when you eat a lot of sugar, it raises your metabolic rate. So you actually start burning more calories, which is why like people that are against sugar are so dumb, because they're like, because actually like sugar actually helps raise your metabolic rate. And if you think that calories and metabolic rate are a function of fat retention, which is not though, then you would think that you'd want to eat more sugar. And the prime, Avelina, the prime, a really excellent demonstration of this concept is what happens to fruitarians. Fruitarians often become extremely emaciated to a point that's really scary, actually. And the reason they do that is because they're consuming a high amount of sugar and very low protein. So their metabolic rate exceeds what their diet is actually providing. And then, Aaron, to answer your question too about protein. So I just eat whatever I want, whatever I feel like. And my diet is such, though, in these behaviors and maintaining the microbiome and vitamin D, make it so that I crave fruits and vegetables, and it's not the other way around. Like if you get a flea up your butt, what's the expression? I don't remember what that one is. To fix your diet and you're not really informed about how biology works. Very often people go like, oh, I'm just gonna have like steamed kale and chicken breast, right? And they start eating like that, but they hate it and it's really dissatisfying. And the reason is because your previous dieting and lifestyle behaviors have not facilitated a healthy commensal microbiome that is required to break down the kale. So when you eat the kale, it doesn't actually do you much good because you're actually not digesting it well. Your microbes aren't breaking it down. And then the only thing that you're benefiting from is the chicken breast. But then also because the kale doesn't really contain tannin, the chicken breast is likely being quite a bit of the protein is being subsumed by ammonia producers, and so then you're also experiencing an elevation in ammonia production that gives you brain fog and makes you feel shitty. And then also because there's no carbohydrate hardly in that meal at all, your gut microbiome dies off even more. So then it's like really impossible to actually feel satiated from that diet, even though you think that you're eating healthy. Instead, there's no better way to restore a healthy microbiome than with fruit and sugar, and then also sun exposure, assuming that you're producing vitamin D, which is also a very complex pathway, like I talk about in my book. And so a lot of people, especially when you're older, you're not producing vitamin D, even if you do get sunshine, and you have to address those underlying factors. But one of the primary factors in feeling satiated is the ability to absorb fat and fat-soluble nutrients, because they're so important in our biological function, especially in terms of hormone production from cholesterol. A lot of people are misinformed that cholesterol comes from you eat cholesterol in your diet. That's not what happens. Cholesterol is made in the body, in the liver, from food that you eat, from protein, sugar, and fats, and fat-soluble nutrients. And I posted on my Patreon like a month ago a natural extension of my discovery of solving the Warburg effect, which is that silicon similarly is actually involved in the digestion and absorption of dietary fats. Fats are absorbed first into the body from little teeny tiny structures called micelles and liposomes and chylomicrons. And I don't know about the chylomicrons, but I know for certain that the micelles and liposomes require a intermediate molecule or element to help them become. So both cholesterol, micelles, and liposomes have an exterior hydrophilic, which means they love water, which means they're soluble in water, an exterior hydrophilic side, and then an interior lipophilic side. So the fats are contained in the structure, and the outside allows it to be to dissolve, to be soluble in water, so that it can actually be transported through the body. Otherwise, fatty nutrients are hydrophobic. So when they're freely dispersed through, say, the watery bloodstream, they coagulate and then start to block the bloodstream, and then you get a heart attack and stroke and embolism and all those things. And so our body, when you're healthy, produces micelles and liposomes and healthy cholesterol to transport those fats and fat-soluble nutrients. And then the body uses cholesterol to make vitamin D and hormones like testosterone and pregnenolone and progesterone and estrogen and the mineralocorticoids, cortisol, and related hormones. And so if you start to lose the ability to digest and absorb fats, then you stop producing as many hormones and vitamin D as you need. And so then you start to feel more hungry all the time because your digestion is very inefficient. So then your body just naturally stimulates you to eat more food. This is one of the reasons why when I first wrote my book in 2018, and the website that my website still exists, but the writings that I had on my website before that, one of my biggest pieces of advice was that when you feel insatiably hungry and you think that you're putting on weight from eating, you can't diet, because when you're in that state, your body can't use calories and nutrients efficiently, but you're also feeding opportunistic microbes that overgrow in the gut. And then on top of that, you still have to and then a lot of nutrients are being used to make and sustain fat. And then you still need to eat on top of that in order to supply muscle and brain and heart tissue. Anyway, so, and that's one of the reasons why. And then also on top of that, when you're metabolically ill, your body is not producing energy from that food efficiently either. And I won't go into the details about that because it's a lot, but your body, like the same calorie of glucose produces much less energy when your mitochondria are not working than it would if they were. So even the amount of food that you're eating is not producing the same amount of energy that it would for somebody who is healthier, which also means that calories are not equivalent in everyone's body. It depends on how metabolically healthy you are. So, so then you become insatiably hungry all the time for all of these reasons. So when you restore your gut microbiome, though, you restore the ability to break down food and properly acidify it. And one of the things I discovered in the cure for cancer, curing the Warburg effect specifically, is that ammonification of the gut by ammonia-producing pathogens alkalinizes the gut because ammonia is highly alkaline. And then that impairs the acidification that normally occurs from digestion, both from stomach acid production and the production of short-chain fatty acids by the commensal microbiome. That facilitates the uptake of nutrients like silicon that need to be acidified in order to be absorbed. When silicon is in an alkaline pH, it tends to spontaneously polymerize. And so you can't absorb silicon when it's all clumped up together. And you need the acid to separate all of the individual atoms of silicon so that you can then absorb them. And when that happens, it also creates acidified forms of the silicon like silicic acid. In the gut, when you're digesting food, that silicon most likely ends up as things like silicon acetate. But there's probably also formation of some propionate and butyrate forms as well. And one of the studies that I found to further inform and reinforce my discovery was one on they were using silicon acetate to help clean up oil spills, because the silicon acetate molecule adsorbed to the oil, not absorb. Adsorb means it sticks to the outside, whereas absorb means it goes into the substance. So this is how I discovered the cure to the Warburg effect. That people who don't understand my discovery don't understand that I found the cure to cancer, is because they don't understand these nuances in biology, that it is very unique that silicon acetate adsorbs to lipids instead of being solubilized in them, or not at all, or having nothing to do with them at all either. And the acidification of silicon is required for that to happen. So then because mitochondria are formed with a lipid bilayer around them, it became very apparent, especially because of the semiconducting properties of silicon, that impairment of the uptake of silicon due to alkalinization of the gut by ammonia is the primary cause of driver of cancer. So as a natural extension of that, when I was doing research into fat digestion, and I was looking at and studying the structures of micelles and liposomes, I realized that silicon might be the primary catalyst that helps those form in the gut during digestion. And sure enough, I looked up a study. It wasn't on gut digestion. It was another study that was just like a clinical study using silicon to form generic, I think it was micelles. And it confirmed that silicon acted as the catalyst for micelle formation if there was acid present. So anyway, so for the same reason that acidifying silicon helps to stop and cure cancer, assuming also the other requirement for that is that you have to also take steps to resolve and eliminate the ammonia producers. You can't just take silicon and get cured from cancer. That's not at all how it works. And there are going to be people that are like, I take the silicon, and that's not how it works. You have to acidify it, promote an acid environment in the gut, and suppress the ammonia-producing microbes. And also, those microbes aren't only also in your gut; they're also in your bloodstream, and they're in the breast tissue, or in your cervix, or in your urethra, or in your esophagus, or in your gastrointestinal tract, or in your prostate. All the places that get cancer. When that occurs, they are currently colonized by ammonia-producing parasites and other microbes. So I realized that for the same reasons that silicon is helps to promote mitochondrial function, also promotes, for the same exact science and physiology, promotes the formation of micelles and liposomes when you eat dietary fat. And that dietary silicon, along with dietary fats, is the primary catalyst for promoting the normal uptake of fats that are used to make cholesterol and hormones, so long as your microbiome is able to also then break down those foods. And this is one of the reasons why we end up craving or even eating animal products, is because almost all food contains silicon. There is silicon in meat and in connective tissues, and one of the reasons that like cartilage and the use of those foods is beneficial to your health is because it also does contain silicon. Silicon is used as a primary component of connective tissues and bone and skin. And so you can get silicon from animal foods, and that's why, like, carnivores exist and they're healthy because they get their silicon by eating other animals that eat plants that have silicon in it. And then if your digestive system is working as a carnivore, you still absorb that dietary silicon. But because we as humans are omnivores, we're not obligate carnivores. When you have a high meat diet, you end up getting colonized more easily by ammonia producers because they use protein as the substrate to make the ammonia in the first place. And the ammonia is what neutralizes the acids and then prevents dietary uptake of silicon. So adopting similarly, Evelina, the steps that promote resolution of cancer to restoring and promoting micelle and liposome formation. Oh, Mike, it's it's MICE, not, there's no S in the middle there, but the rest of it is spelled correct. That then, and promoting the gut microbiome, suppressing ammonia producers, and then eating foods that are high in silicon, like spinach and dates and green beans, along with dietary fat, then increases the absorption of dietary fats and fat-soluble nutrients to not only promote better. And so this is so a lot of you guys know that, like, for the entirety of my career doing this, that I often advocate. Oh, I think, Mike, you also asked a question about this earlier, which is why I didn't answer yet. Advocate the supplemental use of progesterone and pregnenolone. But this is the restoration for natural endogenous production, is to promote an increase in healthy cholesterol production through the way that commensal microbes promote the digestion and absorption of silicon from plant foods like green beans, dates, spinach, that kind of stuff. And the weirdest thing that has happened to me is that ever since I've been doing this purposefully, I have completely lost interest in any animal foods. Not any animal, in eating meat. It's so weird because I haven't, because everybody that knows about my work knows that I don't have ideology when it comes to diet. I eat whatever I feel like. And many years ago, when I first started getting better, I suddenly, and I was following Ray Peat's advice, I'm primarily eating lots of fruit, getting sunshine exposure, lots of sugar. All of a sudden, I started just craving collard greens. Like I had this craving. I tell famously about one in my book, my craving one night for watermelon that I just had to. It was so strong that I had to drive to the store and get a watermelon. But there was another craving later too, where I was like, oh my god, I really want collard greens all the time now. It was so weird. So when I was at the store, I picked up collard greens and had them, and they were so yummy, and I felt delicious. And I realized later, several years later during my research, that your cravings for meat or greens is a direct diagnostic tool to determine your vitamin D status and thaumurkiotis status and B12 status. Because if you are replete with vitamin D and there's thaumurkiota producing B12 locally, that restores the ability to digest plant foods, which is required, which is why we require a microbiome. Then you actually crave plant foods. But if that's not the case, you can't break down foods. You then instead crave foods you can eat easily, like animal foods and refined starches and sugar and stuff like that. And so you can actually even use your cravings as a diagnostic tool to understand why certain things are happening in your health and wellness and diet, and they're not just a tool to achieve those things. That's why I said, like, when people diet and then they typically restrict their intake to what they think is healthy, like really tough greens and meat, you're actually destroying your microbiome and then causing an inability to benefit from a healthy diet. It's not necessarily the healthy diet that promotes health. It's these very specific support of your commensal microbiome that does that. So, so Evelina, like when if you find yourself eating healthy like you think you are, which is to have a smoothie every morning, that's not necessarily it. There's also the other things that are required, like vitamin D sufficiency and B12 availability, and foods that contain silicon that help to promote the uptake of fats required for the production of cholesterol, so long as there is silicon currently in the food that you're eating that facilitates the formation of micelles and liposomes. So I found the same strategy to treat cancer also can accomplish that. The acidification of silicon manually, but also include and I don't know, after I've published the first version of the article where I announced my discovery for the Warburg effect, solving the Warburg effect, I later realized that I could also use silicon by boiling it, a little bit of it, and taking it with tea. Because remember, acidification of silicon by gut microbes is the primary uptake strategy from the gut. You still need stomach acid, though, to inhibit, to break down food and inhibit ammonia producers. But the acidification of nutrients also promotes the uptake. And so when you're drinking tea, which is really high in polyphenols and also tannin that inhibits ammonia, if you're taking silicon with that, then that really strongly promotes acidification of silicon. Because when you drink the tea, the microbes are going to make short-chain fatty acids, and then the silicon that's floating around in the water, which if you boil is also now a hydrated form, which is also acidified silicon, then you're going to get really great uptake of silicon into your body. And doing that every day with just the tea and like 50 milligrams of silicon is what has almost completely resolved the carcinoma that's on my skin. That was on my skin that I put a picture of on the Instagram. And I put that picture up like a month ago, and it's even smaller and more the normal color of my skin. It's really crazy. Your son craves meat, must be an enzyme. Yeah. Craving. So craving meat is a symptom of actually poor dietary fat absorption. caused by absence of a lot of healthy gut microbes that acidify nutrients in silicon. So, oh yeah, you talked about Rhodey last time, Mike. You must really be liking that. Yeah. Really satiating. So Avelina, what you can do is not only have high silicon foods like green beans and spinach, or like, even dates with dietary fat sources, you can also drink tea along with them to help suppress ammonia and promote even more production of short-chain fatty acids in the gut by commensal microbes. And if you add a little bit of silicon to the water that you use to make tea while it's boiling, then that can be an additional source of silicon that helps that. And then you can, and then also just use more fat when you're making those too, like a lot of butter and coconut oil especially. And coconut oil is really good for that too, because coconut oil is high in lauric acid, which very strongly promotes hormone production. I will tell you guys right now too that, so this is really funny, and this is your treat for listening for listening to me talk for 2.5 fucking hours. I think that this is the penis enlargement strategy. For a really long time, I have suspected that that penis size is a direct correlation between both immune function and testosterone levels, and not just testosterone, but also dihydrotestosterone. And one of the problems with cystic fibrosis is the condition being caused by parasites, like I talk about in my book, impairs, especially in males, your production of testosterone, especially dihydrotestosterone. And because women don't have high levels of testosterone, though it's not as obvious in women, and as a woman you can have cystic fibrosis and still reproduce, but males cannot, because of the effect of the disease on their reproduction. And since I'm gay, I never had the opportunity to fail impregnating somebody and thus have my cystic fibrosis diagnosed. Although the coughing should have made it really apparent, but even doctors, when I went to the emergency room with a cough, they told me that I was fine, even though I was coughing like crazy, like every 5 minutes. It was insane. And that's why I almost died too when I was in my early 30s, is because the average lifespan with cystic fibrosis is only about 30 years old. And so anyway, but for obvious reasons, I'm pretty sure that the restoring your cholesterol while also restoring your immune system actually makes your penis bigger. So there you go. I'm going to write that into things later, once I understand it better. But yeah. Because also, the reason I'm also saying this is because when I first got better, I had this same experience, which I wasn't expecting, because I don't really need anything to be bigger. But men, guys, like, even people with big ones want it to be bigger. But I saw that, but I had no idea what could have caused that, so I never even mentioned it in any of my work or my books. But now I'm pretty sure I figured it out. So, and it also very definitely helps rehabilitate reproductive organs, because if you'll remember from my book, I talk about how like cardiovascular health is directly related to the health of your reproductive system. And men, we have like the glands, and a lot of us are circumcised, and there's a lot of problems that prevent your penis from working effectively every time. And I had ED for a really long time, even in my 20s. And unfortunately, because of our diets and environments nowadays, like, it's so common for even young men to start experiencing erectile dysfunction, even when they're in their teenage years and early 20s. And we didn't used to have to experience that as we do nowadays. And it's because of these factors. It's because of things like industrialized diets, the widespread distribution of parasites, poor immune function because of inappropriate diets. You know, there's even the widespread misbelief that quote unquote so-called goitrogens in brassicas causes thyroid problems. In fact, that's not true at all. We need dietary cyanide to support the immune system. And thiocyanate only inhibits iodine uptake into the thyroid if you're deficient in iodine, which you shouldn't be anyway. So there's all this misinformation about vegetables that isn't true. Or, sorry, the problem is that they are based in truth. Like there are studies that show that goitrogens inhibit the uptake of iodine into the thyroid, but then there are other studies that show that that only occurs if there's not enough iodine there in the first place. And the reason that thiocyanate is taken up into the thyroid is because there's a cyanogenic form of thyroid hormone. And it's just, I don't know why I'm the one fucking doing this. I don't have a formal education. So if you're not eating brassicas because you've heard that they're goitrogenic or the vegetables are bad for you, yeah, if you're deficient in B12, you won't be able to break down the brassicas. And it's also not about dietary B12 deficiency. You can use a supplement to replicate this function, but it's directly a function of vitamin D sufficiency and the presence of specialized microbes called archaea that produce B12. But yeah, so Evelina, that's why like you don't feel satiated is because you're not actually absorbing and that's why, and yeah, you said you crave something high fat, high protein later. That's exactly correct. You would expect that. Yep. And it's because your body needs more. It's not absorbing the fat, so you crave it more. And also cholesterol is made out of protein. And so Avelina, it's not really about, having a smoothie every day. It's about eating what you crave. Your body is very good at telling you what you need to eat. So listen to it and then take those steps with restoring the microbiome, acidification, using acidification as a tool to help promote silicon absorption. You can use a low dose of silicon. One thing about silicon is, again, and I warn about this in my work, but I need to be more specific about it. These things are not achieved by silicon. It's the environment that the silicon is in, the acidity. Taking high doses of silicon will only give you silicosis. And one symptom of silicosis, which I found very early in my work and warned people against using supplements that had silicon dioxide in them, is eczema. If you absorb unacidified silicon dioxide, it acts like sand that gets stuck in your tissues, and it can create inflammation in your skin and redness, and exacerbate eczema conditions. So if you start if you take too much silicon and you're not and you're not also acidifying it properly, you can actually just get silicosis from it instead of getting better. So you have to make sure that you understand and are doing those things correctly in order to actually benefit from them at all anyway. So yeah, Mike. So no, you don't need to use a suppository for progesterone. Although you could, and yes, if you're having, and actually guess what, everyone? Progesterone, one of the reasons for its beneficial effects on the body is that it's actually anti-parasitic. The way that I think that this works is because a lot of parasites use estrogen because they don't make their own sex hormones, so they use our sex hormones to promote their own reproduction. But progesterone directly inhibits some of the functions of estrogen, which is especially why when women have a period or cycle, you have a concomitantly high rise in progesterone and estrogen at the same time. And when you don't have either one of those, or you don't have one or the other, you end up getting problems like PCOS and endometriosis and stuff like that. Because endometriosis is also caused by parasitic colonization of the reproductive organs, and diets that prevent production of normal hormone status, normal production of hormones and hormone status. And so you don't have the antiparasitic progesterone production that would keep you. And so when I've been recommending progesterone supplementation and pregnenolone supplementation all of these years, one of the reasons that has been healthful and useful, based on Ray Peace work, like I didn't come up with that. Ray was the one that my work is based on his recommendation for that. The reason that it is protective of your health is because it's also anti-parasitic. And that's why young people look healthy and have an easy time being healthy, is because their continued and persistent production of progesterone is actually preventing them from being parasitized. And so when you do these steps to restore your normal cholesterol production and promote normal digestion, you end up producing your own progesterone and pregnenolone, and then you don't need to supplement it, although you still could, because they are useful too. And then a lot of people who are very ill, that's why when I use progesterone in order to prevent myself from dying from cancer, I got better really fast, and my temperatures came up, and everything improved really rapidly, was because of the anti-parasitic function of that supplemental progesterone. So yeah, so Mike, you could use it as especially if you had prostate cancer, but just taking it orally would be fine. You wouldn't necessarily need to use it as a suppository. I tried doing certain things like that as a suppository when I was first ill, and they had like a really direct effect. But the problem, though, at the root of prostate problems is not that you aren't putting progesterone up your butt. It's that your normal digestive system is not working because of the interruption of opportunistic microbes and destabilizing the commensal microbiome. So when you take steps to do that, you can actually just restore your natural production of those things just from eating food like you have to do anyway, so it becomes a lot easier. So, yeah. Silicon powder, what form? Not silicon dioxide. Well, I think technically, Mike, you could probably use kind of any form of silicon, because silicon tends to be acidified really easily. That's not a very technical term, but it is what's happening. So if you had, like, say for instance, if you had a supplement of silicon dioxide and you mix a tiny bit of it in water with a lot of acid in there, it would acidify into silicate acid. But I think it's safest to use a plant source originated of silicon, like bamboo silica, and do that, and not a lot. Follow the directions in the book or on the website, and then primarily rely on actually like high silicon foods like dates and spinach and green beans. Oh my god, green beans are so good. When I realized this, I had like a giant bag of green beans in my fridge that I only ate occasionally, and I went and I cooked up the entire thing in a lot of butter and coconut oil. And when you get those green beans like just right, like they get that little char on them and they're oily and salty. Oh my god, it's so good. It's really good. It's so good. Like literally just like you could do this just having green beans every single day if you wanted, as long as you don't make yourself sick of them. It works really, really well. So, yeah. So that's a prime example of how this whole thing, when we started this stream, excuse me. Sorry. I did that right into the mic. How this whole stream started, in that the information that exists that's informing people's decision to avoid vegetables, like the information being used to make those decisions is not wrong. It is how you're using that information to make decisions that is wrong and preventing you from recovering. Is because the solution to those problems is not to avoid them. That only causes nutrient and microbiome deficiencies and dysregulation. And instead, you need to restore your microbiome and ability to digest those foods so that you can then benefit from their native vitamin K and vitamin E and silicon and all these other nutrients that we need. So, yeah. Men with cystic fibrosis are most always infertile. Yeah, due to congenital bilateral absence of the vas deferens. Yep. Which means their sperm ducts are missing. Yeah. It's crazy. That's why, Mike, like, actually, I have never had a wet dream in my entire life. And because I was raised in an abusive, hateful, religious household, I thought it was punishment for jerking off. You know? But it's because and that's why too, that's like it's like a good demonstration of like how religion is so harmful so often, is because I never even told anyone about that because I was ashamed of it being a thing and thought there was just something wrong. I mean, there was something wrong with me. It just wasn't what all those stupid fucking religious people told me was wrong. I had cystic fibrosis, and then my parents' religious beliefs prevented me from being diagnosed and treated and understanding it, and then caused me a huge amount of suffering. But also, though, this underlies the reason why we haven't had a cure for these things anyway in the first place. And that these diseases could have been discovered and cured hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, if people hadn't come up with religious explanations and mythological explanations for things that are biological and real. And it doesn't mean there isn't an existence of spirituality and God or anything like that. That is actually the subject of my third book that I'm working on, is the science of spirituality. Is religion. Religion is stupid. It's so fucking stupid. It causes people to be dumb as hell and to be diseased. And religious people go around harboring parasites and spreading parasites and disease because they don't know that they are infected by them and believe that Jesus cares if you're fat or not. It's so dumb. So like because of it, I've never actually had a wet dream at all. And it's because, and you know what's really funny too is women also have wet dreams, but no one talks about that because women don't ejaculate. People with vaginas don't ejaculate, and people with penises do. So it's not as obvious. But females, people with not a prostate, people with a vagina still will wake up from orgasming sometimes, because that the body does that. That's part of the body. And I think part of the reason it happens in people with a prostate and penis is to just continue, and why masturbation and jacking off exists as a biological function is just to keep sperm fresh. Because God knows if you don't get off regularly, that stuff that's just gonna sit in there, and it's gonna go bad after a time. So you got to get it out. And then if you don't jerk off, then a wet dream does that automatically. But jerking off does it too, so that your sperm is fresh, and functioning. And then that goes into the whole community of people who are sex shaming and think that refraining from masturbation is healthy, and that sex is part of the reason that they feel bad. But in fact, the reason that their sex organs are not working properly is also because of parasites that colonize the reproductive system that we were just talking about. And because you have ideological beliefs about biological function, you never arrive to the actual solution. So you spend your entire life just fighting your own desire to jerk off, which is so dumb. Anyway, okay, I've got to end, but I'll finish these last ones that Rem, you asked. You've been mixing bamboo. Oh yeah, bamboo extract, pectin, lemon juice, mixing 1 minute. Yeah. That is a proper way. Yes, Rem. You can do other ways, but that one does work great. If you have cancer, that one's an especially good way to do. But you don't also don't have to. The way that I've been doing it, because I'm not severely ill. Because remember, this way is dependent, and also that pectin use, that is dependent on the presence of commensal microbes. There are a lot of reasons why you might not have good commensal microbes. Especially because of antibiotic use or chemotherapy even kills off your microbiome. So using silicon in your tea like I do would not work for someone who is missing their microbiome. But if you have microbiome and your digestion isn't so bad, you can just put it in the water that you use to make tea, and it's much easier and really nice. So yeah. Okay. All right. Well, hey everyone, thank you so much for coming by and chatting and hanging out. That was nice, and now that I don't have so much research, I have a lot more time to actually and my mental space actually do streaming. So yeah, so thanks for being here. I hope your guys' years are going well so far in spite of everything, and especially if you find current events very stressful, do inventory therapy. It helps a great deal. And I wish you all well, and I will see you all next time. And and also you can go follow my social media. I'm on Blue Sky, Instagram. Obviously here, if you like and subscribe, it helps my channel. Share this with other people if you like. And you can go support my work too on Patreon. That helps me to be able to do this kind of stuff at all in the first place. So really appreciate you Patreon subscribers. And then I also promote and post things there first before I do anywhere else. So you can get privileged access there as well. And also you can also sign up on Patreon for free too. Like when I make announcements, like I'm going to stream, I always do it there too. So, and you get an email notification and things like that, and you don't even have to pay for that stuff. So yeah. All right. Anyway, have a good day. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you guys later.